No matter when you do it, and no matter when you say it, highlighting that the Middle East is flaring up is never news. Yet, since the Hamas attacks in October 2023, things are getting even more complicated than we have seen for many years. Why do I say this? Well, you see, over recent decades, the conflicts in the area were basically limited. Israel against Hamas, Saudi Arabia against the Houthis, Iraq against the pro-Tehran militias, or the endless political labyrinth of Syria. Of course, in each of these confrontations, there were regional interests, but let's just say that, ultimately, they were watertight compartments. There was no regional contagion. However, in 2024, things look totally different.
U.S. carries out retaliatory strikes on Iranian-linked militia targets in Iraq and Syria. Biden faces demands from Republicans in Congress to strike Iran after U.S. troop deaths. U.S. multiple actions likely in response to Jordan strike.
On 29th of January, the Kataib Hezbollah, the Islamic resistance movement of Iraq, launched a series of attacks on US military positions in Jordan. The attack left 3 people dead. Not surprisingly, the response of the greatest military machine of all time was not long in coming. Several punitive operations were carried out against pro-Iranian militia positions in Iraq and Syria.
A leader of Kataib Hezbollah and 2 of his guards were in a vehicle when it was targeted in the east of the Iraqi capital. All 3 of them died. The Pentagon said the commander was responsible for directing attacks on American forces in the region.
We do not see conflict in the Middle East or anywhere else, but attacks on American forces will not be tolerated, and we will continue to take all necessary actions to defend the United States, our forces, and our interests.
VisualPolitik community, what began as a terrorist incursion by Hamas against Israeli towns near the Gaza Strip is now provoking a wave of multiple violence. The assault and attack against merchant ships in the Red Sea, the red-hot tension in Lebanon, and the reactivation of numerous guerrilla groups throughout the region. For the moment, the major Arab powers seem to be looking the other way, but let's not fool ourselves. The threat of this whole mess turning into a new regional conflict is on the table, and we are referring to one conflict above all others: the armed clash between Washington and Tehran. The nuclear program, the support to terrorist groups, the hijacking of merchant ships, its alliance with China, the delivery of drones to Russia for use in Ukraine. The Ayatollah's regime is becoming increasingly uncomfortable for Washington. And so we on VisualPolitik have asked ourselves the following: is an armed clash between the US and Iran inevitable? Will the Biden administration end its term in office in a fight with Iran? Today, we answer all these questions. Since the end of World War II, there have been no more large-scale military conflicts between great powers. These have been replaced mainly by what have come to be known as proxy wars. That is, military conflicts in which the powers do not engage simultaneously against each other, but rather support the side that best represents their interests. In the case of the Middle East, the concept of proxy warfare has undergone a major metamorphosis. In this case, conflicts in recent decades have been characterized by the fact that they are not between states, but rather between armed groups that confront the states themselves. We are talking mostly about Islamic militia groups that are usually backed by Tehran. We've told you about this a lot of times on VisualPolitik, and although Hollywood movies portray these militia groups as a bunch of fanatics riding pickup trucks with machine guns, the truth is that in recent years, both their preparation and the equipment they operate have become much more sophisticated.
Kasef K2, the Yemeni drones that provoke terror in Saudi oil companies. Iran helped Hamas develop missile technology used to attack Israel. U.S. Navy intercepts sophisticated Iranian missile components headed for Houthis.
All these capabilities have obviously become more evident than ever after the Israeli offensive in Gaza, an intervention that has aroused the anger of these militias and have even led them to target U.S. troops. To sum up, right now in the Middle East, we have 2 major sides and 4 different territories involved in the fight. If we are not yet talking about a regional conflict, it is because, for now, the fight is between clowns and not directly with the owner of the circus. Let me explain. It is no secret that Iran articulates its interventions abroad through terrorist groups and armed militias. However, where many journalists consistently get it wrong is that this is not simply a political strategy, but also, and above all, represents represents the spearhead of Iranian military power. You see, Iran's political and military system is highly unusual. It is made up of various institutions and factions, each of which has its own agenda and pursues its own objectives. As we've told you many times here on VisualPolitik, the most important of these factions is the Revolutionary Guard, Iran's second army, and the one in charge of pursuing ideological and religious objectives. The Revolutionary Guard is the force in charge of training, coordinating, and equipping dozens of militia groups, in exchange, of course, for their objectives and those of Tehran being perfectly aligned. In this way, Iran has multiplied its influence and ultimately its capacity for deterrence. Why? Well, because if you get into a fight with Tehran, then its tentacles could blow up the whole region. This is what we would call the explosive piñata strategy. And guess what? In recent times, we have had a good demonstration of what this means.
And proxy groups that are exploiting the situation and conducting these types of illegal attacks against forces that are in the region to actually preserve peace and stability. So again, we're going to do what we need to do to protect our forces, while also cognizant of the fact that what we don't want is a wider regional conflict.
VisualPolitik viewers, so far this strategy, along with the accumulation of thousands of missiles, has been very effective. In recent decades, we have seen an all-out war between the United States and Iran, but it has been a Cold War. Washington has been very careful not to go overboard, no matter whether we are talking about hijacked oil tankers, the attack on refineries in Arabia, the supply of equipment for intervening in Yemen or Syria, or the nuclear program. The question is, how long can this shield last? Aren't things getting out of hand? Let's take a look.
The fuse is set.
The United States has, under its control, the greatest war machine ever designed and developed by man. It is the only country in all of history that has had the ability to act militarily at any time in virtually any part of the world. Good evidence of this enormous capacity are the 11 unified commands that the United States has in place to control its activities around the world, including the digital world and also space. One of them is precisely the Central Command, which is in charge of conducting operations in Central Asia, the Persian Gulf, and the Horn of Africa. This command, curiously, entered service in 1983, only 4 years after the Islamic Revolution and the founding of the Revolutionary Guard. And guess what? The following are nothing less than the priorities of this Central Command. Check it out.
U.S. deterrence goals at CENTCOM in 3 key objectives. 1. Deter Iran and Iranian-backed proxies from attempting to restrict access to the global commons. 2. Deter Iran and Iranian-backed proxies from attacking deployed U.S. personnel. And 3. Deter Iran and Iranian-backed proxies from attacking U.S. partners.
But let's look at it in more detail. First of all, the Central Command's priority has been not so much to prepare to fight Iran if necessary, but above all, to ensure that its militias do not hinder the flow of goods and hydrocarbons. Keep in mind that 8% of global trade passes through Yemen's Red Sea coast. The importance of this goal has been made abundantly clear with the recent deployment of Operation Guardians of Prosperity, where the US is leading a combat force that seeks to allow safe passage through these waters in the face of the Houthi threat. The second and third priority of the United States has been to protect the troops it has stationed at various bases around Iran and to prevent Iran from being able to attack American allies. It is here that Iran's huge missile stockpiling and the improvements it has made to this equipment play a key role. Military equipment that already gives Tehran the capacity to attack practically all the major enclaves in the Middle East. Precisely to meet this threat, the United States has significant air capabilities deployed at Al Dhafra base in the United Arab Emirates and the Al Udeid base in Qatar. Specifically, we are talking about 6 squadrons of strike fighters, including the F-35A, squadrons of advanced scout and strike drones, E-3 early warning units, and other equipment. Likewise, in this region, the United States has also deployed, in this case in Kuwait, its 2 large anti-aircraft defense systems, the Patriot and the famous THAAD, against ballistic missiles. And of course, we cannot forget that Bahrain is home to the 5th Fleet. We are talking about a huge concentration of force that has traditionally been aimed at deterring the Ayatollahs from overreaching. However, there is one problem. They are not succeeding. Yes, Iran may not have launched any war directly, but the Revolutionary Guard have contributed to sowing chaos throughout the region. For example, it seems that they were in some way behind Hamas's brutal attack on Israel on 7th of October. How? By providing the Palestinian terrorist group with weapons and training. And not only that, as we said earlier, there is also the issue of the nuclear program, which is unacceptable because of the risk it would pose for Israel, for the deterrence of the United States itself, which would lose a lot of strength, and also due to the risk of nuclear proliferation. Obviously, if Iran gets hold of the bomb, don't think for a moment that Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, or even Turkey will stand idly by. And to top it all off, there is their support for Russia. Iran is becoming an increasingly concerning headache for Washington. All the massive military buildup has failed to achieve its most important goal, getting Iran to stop taunting it. And that is why more and more analysts are beginning to see that there may be no way out for Washington, other than to put its foot down firmly. But is that really advisable? Listen up.
Cheating issue.
VisualPolitik viewers, Iran's and America's fighting forces couldn't be more different, to the point that, in Washington, they remain convinced that the Ayatollahs and their friends don't want a war.
No. Iran does not want a war with us.
And let's see, in a way, it makes sense. Logically, nobody wants a war with the United States, but Iran's conventional combat capability is also very limited. Precisely because of this, its strategy has been to threaten to turn the whole region into a huge hornet's nest, and at the same time, to launch a lot of missiles on the oil fields of Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. After all, if a few missiles hit their target, that could have serious repercussions on the international oil market, which in turn makes the White House think twice about punishing Iran. You know, the good old exploding piñata strategy. So obviously, Tehran has not hesitated. The bulk of the budget has gone to the Revolutionary Guard, and not to the army. In fact, the missile systems themselves are mainly under the command and control of the Revolutionary Guard, and not the conventional army, leaving that army really quite neglected. But of course, the question many in Washington are asking is, until when? If Iran does not give in on its nuclear program, the United States will be forced to do something. If the Ayatollahs and their Revolutionary Guards keep pouring fuel on the Middle East fire, the United States will have to act. And so it goes on and on. And do you know which country could be the most interested in this happening? Well, we can speak of not one, but two: Israel and Saudi Arabia. For Israel, putting an end to the Ayatollah's power would mean putting an end to its only existential threat. For Saudi Arabia, it would give a free rein for its regional leadership. And can you remember, what pact is being negotiated under the table that Washington is so interested in? 3, 2, 1. That's right, the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Wouldn't it be a good prize for both of them if Washington handed them Iran's head in exchange for these countries' success in making the Middle East a much more stable region? Well, look out for this. Of course, a war is always an evil to be avoided, but the situation is getting worse and worse. Be that as it may, having reached this point, it's your turn. Do you think the United States will end up attacking the Ayatollah's regime? What would you do to stop the Iranian threat? Leave us your thoughts in the comments, and let's open a debate. And now, if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to VisualPolitik if you haven't already done so. Thank you very much for watching. All the best. See you next time.